Hello, everybody, and welcome to Starting Small Music. I'm Justin McCormick, and you're about to hear a conversation with an artist, musician, and music industry professional on their journey and how they got to where they are today. At Starting Small, we like to take you on a journey uncovering the untold stories of your favorite songs and artists. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
Just keep a smile on your face and it'll be okay. Try not to be bitter, you gotta do it either way. Keep a smile on your face and it'll be okay. So when life throws a jab, you gotta duck out of the way.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Starting Small Music Podcast. Today we have hit songwriter Jim McCormick with us. How you doing today, Jim?
Good, Justin. Yourself?
I'm doing great. So getting right into your story, you grew up in New Orleans. What was your childhood like?
I had a good childhood. I really did. I had a great mom and dad, and still have a great mom. And the neighborhood I grew up in was about a block from the Mississippi River. It was Algiers is a section of New Orleans across the Mississippi from New Orleans. And I went to Catholic grade school and Catholic high school. I think as I got away and kind of looked back, I realized like not everybody eats red beans on Monday around the world, and not everybody had Dr. John and the Neville Brothers spliced in between Led Zeppelin and Pink Floyd on the radio when they were kids. And there's a lot of things that I think kind of seeped in on, naturally from growing up in that city, and I'm very grateful for it. It's a rich place to grow up. It really is. Obviously, there's been. Forget me, man. There's enormous talent that's come out of that city, and I think it's testament to what a rich melting pot it is of music and styles, and just there's so much great stuff to fall in love with culturally.
For sure. Now, you mentioned a couple bands there. Who are some of the bands you remember just hearing like at an earlier age around the house that made you feel a connection to music early on?
Man, I mean, if I gotta be honest about that, it's really kind of starts as a child with those programs that PBS used to run, Sesame Street, Mr. Rogers, and the Electric Company, and Zoom. That's probably, and then Saturday morning cartoons. And I remember being like really drawn. I'd make like a cassette collection of every TV theme song that I heard in the '70s growing up. I loved all that MASH and Love Boat and Fantasy Island and Welcome Back, Kotter and the Jeffersons and Happy Days, and all those songs were really effective in touching something in me that made, I didn't think I'd be a songwriter, but I remember being kind of glued to the TV with my cassette recorder, making those recordings. And then he kind of fell into, rock radio like every other kid, and I can remember I asked my mom for a cassette player for some records, for some cassettes, to play. And she must have just gone to the record store and said, my 8-year-old boy is asking for, some records. What do you got? And she came home that Christmas. I got the Everly Brothers Greatest Hits and Queen, the album Jazz.
Okay.
And I think the next cassette that I went and bought was Foreigner Head Games. And that was it, man. I was off to the races. I loved music, and I loved discovering it and going to the record store. And, at that point, I was just doing cassettes. When vinyl finally when I got a turntable, I remember my first vinyl was Journey Escape, So, and then I was all over the map, it's just, it wasn't much different than most, suburban American childhoods, I would imagine, around the country.
For sure. Now, a lot of that music, did that influence you to kind of want to start the rock band that you formed with your buddies early on?
Yeah, I think so. I think at that point, that was 1983, and we were in high school. They were an all-instrumental blues band, and they were playing things like Jimmy Reed and J.J. Cale and Stevie Ray Vaughan and Jimi Hendrix and Clapton stuff, but it was all instrumental. And I wasn't that into blues rock. I was more of a Pink Floyd fan, and I was all over the map. I had friends with big brothers who had record collections that were, that stretched along the entire wall of their bedroom. And we'd get down there on the floor and play everything from Jesus Christ Superstar to Allman Brothers to Led Zeppelin galore. Led Zeppelin was a big cornerstone of my childhood and adolescence, listening habits.
Yeah.
The rock band, I think what's every 15-year-old boy want to do? It's like, we can jam out and we could, drink a beer and we can, the girls are going to come to the show. And it was driven by all of those, sort of, hormone driven things of a boy back then. But I really enjoyed it. Once I started, it was the first time I ever collaborated and wrote lyrics with anybody. And once I got into that part of it, I was kind of hooked. The stagecraft, being up on stage and stuff, didn't really come naturally to me. I eventually kind of really loved it. I didn't play an instrument at the time, so it was kind of learning how to stand on stage and what to do with your hands and how to hold a mic stand and a microphone. And at that point, I became a student of Paul Rodgers and Jim Morrison, trying to figure out, like, well, what did they do? Like, they didn't play an instrument either. So
exactly.
I was just groping in the dark, man. I was just trying to figure it all out, life and music and how to be friends with my bandmates without killing each other.
Right. Now, were you like a driving force for them to like want to start doing original material, or were they already doing it at that time when you joined the band?
They were, yes, great question. They were already writing instrumental originals. So for the first time, I would listen to them. They gave me a collection of songs, and I kind of picked out the ones that I could hear a melody over, and maybe there was a section that looked like a chorus, that built like a chorus, and those were kind of our first stabs at writing songs, and it was a lot of fun. It really was. Ed Conway was the main guitar player and creative musician in that band, and so he and I fell into writing songs directly with each other a lot. We collaborated as a band, and we split everything up evenly. Ed would usually bring the musical idea. And, I think, so that band stayed together for 3 years, 4 years, and then we all went to college. And they had gone to Tulane University, and, I was graduating. I kind of called them up. I was like, you want to put the band back together? I mean, I didn't know what I wanted to do getting out of college. And so Ed and I then, had another tenure together of about seven years. Writing songs at a much better level, I think, still not quite as accomplished as I wanted to get. But, he had been my sole co-writer for a really, really long time in my life, till I was probably, late 20s.
Wow.
I know I'm jumping ahead on you there, but yeah, all that stuff, I look back at, all that was formative. I wouldn't trade any of it. It was really a great sort of, nurturing ground for me to grow in. And just kind of try some things out. When we started the rock band after college, grunge was great, and Eddie Vedder, was on top of the world, and I didn't know how we were going to cut through all of that, and we didn't. Is the short of it. We were like an A&R man's nightmare. We were kind of like this funk, this rhythm section, kind of born out of New Orleans R&B, Meters, Neville Brothers, Dr. John, coupled with a guitarist, a blues rock, southern rock guitarist, and me, I don't know what I was, man. I was trying to write poetry and sing it in some kind of a southern rock style, and I was just, like I said, groping, trying to find my way through it all.
Sure.
And they were very patient with me. I owe them a great debt of gratitude for letting me develop all those years with them.
Now, at your time at Georgetown, you go to a poetry workshop, which makes you change your major from business to English. How did that poetry workshop not only change your major, but did it change your outlook on your writing process at all?
Well, I mean, up until then, I hadn't really understood, I think, that writing was something you could really sink your teeth into as a vocation, if not a career. That it was the scope of what writing and literature was tremendous. It was as large as all of history, and you just, I fell in love with it, is the short of it. I just really fell in love with the craft of poetry, and I fell in love with reading contemporary American poetry. And it gave me a better handle on how to go back and read later on in life, the Romantics and Elizabethan poetry and Shakespeare and those things. It was really, it cracked my head open. I mean, my mind exploded when I found it. And at that point, I wasn't thinking, oh, I'm going to take this into being a song lyricist. I didn't think I was going to do anything with music necessarily. When I switched my major from business to English, it was just because of a pure reaction to literature that I felt. And I think I knew instinctually, like, well, if I love something this much, maybe I could be pretty good at it. Maybe I should take a crack at it.
For sure. Now, after college, you're still doing music with your rock band, and you begin to take trips to Nashville for about 4 years. You said you would go up about every 2 weeks. Take me through that grunge period of just like going back and forth to town.
So, well, the rock band in New Orleans was a great time, right? We put the band back together. It was 4 childhood friends running through the Southeast in a F-150 custom van with all our gear, no air condition, just, barefoot, shorts on, 98, 99 degrees weather in the summertime. And we would just kind of do that triangle from like Houston. I think we went as far north as Norfolk, Virginia, and down to Fort Myers, Florida, and all the little college towns we could. We opened for everybody. And I got there's a lot of gratitude I have for the older bands that from the New Orleans area that let us open for them so many times. Cowboy Mouth, Dash Rip Rock, the Subdudes, Continental Drifters. There's a lot, the Radiators, a lot of folks kind of like gave us a spotlight before their shows in different towns. And that led us to have a foothold, a small one in those towns later. If we had any kind of foothold, they kind of opened the doors for us. That was like, just a great time of my life. It really was. It was a well-wasted youth is what I like to call it. And then the band broke up. 2 guys got married and life started to change. And we had gotten tired of each other. And you can only kind of live on 99-cent menus and 1 Motel 6 for 4 guys and all that for so long. And, there's a difference between being 21 and 27, 28, right? And you kind of, and so we went our separate ways. And I started to play solo. And I put a band together to back me. And I really have lost the fire for it. I just didn't have the spirit that I think, the live thing I'd scratched that itch pretty good. And I knew I had. Now I was just kind of riding on vapor and wanting to book shows and perform and stuff. But I still loved the part of it all that was the songwriting. And that never left me. I continued to write songs. I went and got a day job. I was a managing editor at a trade magazine for the coin-op amusement business, pool tables and vending machines and things like that here in New Orleans. And then, it just kind of eroded me. And I realized after 3 years there that this was not what I was supposed to do with my life. I was utterly unhappy. And I had met a songwriter in Nashville through a musician in New Orleans. And his name was Chris Bergsness. And Chris had offered me to come to Nashville. And this is when I had my rock band and we were in full swing. And I was like, man, country smuntry. I'm not coming to Nashville. I don't even listen to country. I don't know what that is, But I did listen to country, and I didn't really realize. I already was like deeply into the Texas scene of Towns and Guy, and I knew Steve Earle's work, and I knew Nitty Gritty Dirt Band, I knew like some the stuff around country radio stuff. And so I went up there, and I mean, Justin, I fell in love with it, like I fell in love with literature back in college, and I was like, holy cow, there's a job called songwriter. I'm getting that job. And that was it. I was like a horse going back to the stables, and I knew in my heart that this was something that I was called to do. And because I felt so happy every time I was doing it. And I'd go up there at that point. So I got fired from the editorship at the magazine because I kept making all these trips to Nashville. Best favor anybody ever did me. And I would go up there and I would, sleep on the couch at Chris's place, and I would write songs 3 times, 4 times a day with some of the guys who are my best friends now, who I still write with. I would just do it, and then I'd come back to New Orleans and I'd paint houses and hang sheetrock and just do whatever cash making business I could under the table and fill up my little Toyota and drive back up to Nashville. I mean, it was like talk about threadbare. But I didn't see it like that. I saw it as like a kid looking into the candy store before they let me in. I knew I wanted to get in there. It was one of the happiest times of my life, honestly, man. It really was,
For sure.
It was everybody I think in Nashville's got that story of it's ridiculous, right? On the outside, it looks so threadbare. So the odds are so incredible. It's just like, what are you doing? And of course, the people around me who loved me, they were terrified for me. I'd get, my mom and my dad, they just check in and be like, are you sure you're doing the right thing? Kind of thing. And I'm like, if I could just get an at bat, if I can just get a crack at it, I think I'm going to get in. Yeah. Just, and I'm working with some great people. And that's it, man. Just kind of like rolled like that, you know. It took 4 years before I got offered a publishing deal of sleeping on the couch. You know, I could have got a law degree, could have done a lot of things in those 4 years, but that was the thing, and I'm so glad I did it. You know, I remember at some point Chris said to me, because I was, you know, it's a struggle, right? You're kind of like rolling along. It's like, you know, it's like, how long does it take? Can I do this? Is it going to happen? You know, and he's like, well, I'll put it this way: one day you're going to turn 40. Do you want to turn 40 having never tried being a hit songwriter, or do you want to turn 40 being a hit songwriter? You know, and I was like, yeah, you're right. I have to pursue this until they tell me go home.
Exactly. So you end up having your first number one, You Don't Know Her Like I Do by Brantley Gilbert, which is so cool because, I mean, it sounds like nothing else that he has put out before that and since then. I feel like one of his best songs. Take me through the day that you wrote it.
Thank you. Man, it was a funny day. He and I had met at Warner Chappell previously a few times in the hallway. We were both writers signed to that company. And we had a day together, and we showed up. He was on a phone with a buddy, and he was having a conversation about a girl, and he was kind of defending the girl and his relationship with the girl to his buddy. And it wasn't a hostile call. It was like he was very lovingly kind of understanding where his friend was coming from. His friend was being protective of him, I would think. And he was kind of, you know, just laying out the virtues of the relationship and of her, and kind of like, you know, well, I didn't really realize all that until, you know, 45 minutes in, and he's still on the phone. And I was like, well, all right, you're saying some really wonderful things, and I'm sitting here, and I as well write some of them down because they're pretty good. And so I wrote notes, I wrote a list of things that he was saying, the real things that he was saying. And he got off the phone. I don't know how long it was exactly, but by that point I had amassed a pretty good little few lines. And he was like, you know, so I think, you know, he was apologizing, just saying, I'm sorry, man, let's get another day. I know I wasted the morning here. And I was like, man, if you just look at what I wrote down, some of the things you were saying could make a great song. And I turned to the computer, I showed him, and he was like, give me the guitar, let's do this. Yeah. And that's how we wrote it. And I remember, I think we wrote it pretty quick. You know, I don't think it took that long. And I think that's because it was pretty true. It was all real. And, you know, when you're riding on that kind of fire, it's like, it can pour out of you pretty quick. You know, you're not searching for it. It's all kind of right there in you at the moment. And, you know, that was just a very lucky day for me to be in the room with Brantley Gilbert.
For sure. And the track does a cool thing where it like you think the song is over, and then the piano comes back in and his vocal comes back in. Did you guys write it like that, or is that something that came on post-production?
I don't know. Dan Huff produced it, and I don't know where that idea came from, but I loved it, right?
I know.
I just loved it. Yeah, the first time I heard it, I was blown away.
Now, another one of my favorites that I'd love to hear the story to is It's All Coming Back to Me Now by Ronnie Millsap. So legendary to have a song with Ronnie, and it just mixes his sound with like a Billy Currington kind of vibe. Take me through the day you wrote that one.
Man, thanks for bringing that one up. I love that song so much. And, you know, I wrote that with the soul man, Jason Matthews, who's a great singer. And, you know, and John Mabe was with us as well. John's a great singer. So I don't know which of those guys, probably a combo of both of them, really touched on that melody. But that melody, you know, yeah, that melody is just beautiful. And I think, if I remember correctly, we wrote it, Winona was looking at the time. I think the word was out that Winona was looking for a song. Mm-hmm. And so we kind of wrote it with her in mind. You can imagine she can kind of do that same thing really well. I remember, you know, just cobbling together, you know, a well-crafted song, a really well-built kind of soul R&B country song.
For
and,
sure.
You know, I think Ronnie announced that he was making a new album sometime after we wrote that song. I don't think we knew that Ronnie was making an album at the time that we wrote it, but it's a perfect fit. Carol Ann Mobley was the one at RCA who got the song to Ronnie for us. I don't know who pitched it to Carol, but yeah, man, I remember the day going into RCA to hear the song. He had called us and said, y'all want to come hear the track?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I was still pretty young, you know. I don't even know what, like, you know, what do you wear? What do you wear when you go to that kind of thing? What, you know, it's like, um, and I just remember sitting there, and just what you said earlier, you know, like, oh my God, like that voice is singing some of the words that I had a hand in crafting, kind of thing. It's just like, this is a high like no other right here, you know. And I've had the same feeling over and over and over again when you hear some of these great voices singing words that, you know, that at one point you were just kind of putting them into a little guitar vocal, right? It's just
Right.
like, it's really it's a beautiful, beautiful feeling. It's a great feeling. Nothing like it.
Now,
Except writing the song itself. That's a better writing the song itself is the best feeling.
Oh, totally.
And then hearing it rendered is just like, wow. All right.
Now, this is actually going back a little bit in the story, but Luke Bryan was actually one of, if not the first, but one of the first people that you were co-writing with when you moved to town. Any early funny memories from the writing room with him and you guys kind of cutting your chops together?
A million. Yeah, man. I mean, that was just like the two of us. You know, we didn't know much, man, but we were going to figure it out. We wrote together a lot. You know, I mean, multiple times every week, and we lived together for a little bit. And he was always a great friend and always a hard worker, and still is to this day. Both those things. Yeah, I mean, this will tell you, this is like a little bit of a New Orleans thing too. You know, it's like I remember we went to lunch. We were with Brandon Kinney, and we wrote in the morning. We went to lunch. You know, we used to go to lunch when we write these songs in Nashville, right? Nobody goes to lunch anymore. Wish we did more of that. But we went to lunch. We came back. I picked up the guitar and I sang the song we were writing. And I remember, like, after I sang the chorus or whatever, Luke just like you know, because in New Orleans everything is sung and played way back behind the beat.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like way like back behind Willie Nelson, back behind the beat. Like it's way back there, right? It's just like, and I mean, Luke looked at me and was like, "What was that? Like, give me that, you know, don't do that again," right? Because at that point, at least, the influences of hip hop and pop had not really come into Nashville as strongly, and I think, you know, that was kind of the moment where I decided to never sing my demos.
Now,
you know,
right. Now, another one that I'd love to touch on too is Take a Little Ride, Jason Aldean. I think that it's cool because you probably pulled in a lot of elements from your rock past writing that song. And is there any lyrics that stand out that you remember just writing that day and you're thinking like, dang, like this is a cool song?
Oh, all of them. And, you know, I like to say that if you substitute the Rocky Tops for Dixie beer, and you substitute the cornrows for the levee on the Mississippi River, and you substitute the Quick Stop for the Time Saver, you have my delinquent childhood in New Orleans, right? It's just like what we did. It was just, we were putting it in the setting that Rodney grew up in Texas, which is decidedly more country and appropriate for our market. But
yeah,
I mean, that was a great day. That was three really good friends coming together. And Dylan Altman, I think, brought that riff. Dylan's a great guitar player as well as a great songwriter and singer. And he brought that riff, and it was like, yeah, man. And I mentioned Zeppelin earlier, and it was like, that's what it touched in me. It was like this, it was maybe a little more rock and roll, blues rock and roll than we ultimately landed the demo. But, you know, that's what you want, is the room to kind of light up on some, whether it's the title or guitar riff, or just the general idea. You want all the writers in the room to get excited about something. And we all got excited about that riff. And we knew we were going to build the song around that, you know.
for sure. Now, take me through kind of what your creative process is today. I know that your stress is mainly on the lyric. Like when you're coming in to write, are you bringing in the title, maybe like the hook, part of a chorus? What's your process normally like?
Well, you nailed it. Yeah. I mean, as a lyricist, I kind of see it as my job is to come into the session with some ideas, some hooks. And if not an idea of exactly how to write it, at least, you know, something that's kind of remarkable, right, in the way of the lyric, in the title, in the hook. So I spent a lot of my time, you know, fishing for ideas. And, you know, my radar is always out listening to conversations and movies and TV shows. And, but I do a lot of purposeful time reading and, you know, just leisurely going through language
Yeah.
in my way, with my med out and looking for titles and looking for ideas for songs, and then, so, and I do that because I realize I bring a guitar, and I'd sometimes be the singer early on in my time on Music Row. And I just realized, like, my left hook is words, and there's guys here who can sing circles around me, and God knows play guitar better than me. So, I was like, I need to just, and kind of just business wise, when I narrowed it down to what my skill set, what I really had to offer, my publisher was much better at pairing me up with people who had complementary skill sets, right? I was never put in a room with another person who couldn't play guitar or sing. It was like, okay, so now we know this is what Jim does. Let's get him in collaboration with, a great singer who's got a record deal, and a producer or a musician who can really pair it up in the construction of the music of the song. So that's kind of, my process. I think the process starts way before you get in the room. The process is kind of your preparation, your mindset. I like to get up early, do a little reading, take a long walk, get a breakfast, get the right cup of coffee. It's like, if you don't know somebody, you're kind of hanging out for a second, like, where are you from, whatever, like that. But you want to, I treat it like an athletic event. You want it,
Sure.
like a performance. I mean, the writing day is like a performance. You want to show up big for that day and bring the best you got, not just creatively, but psychologically and interpersonally with people, and just, make it a great day. And the odds of it being a great song are that much better.
Right. I think you hit it right on the spot with keeping the antenna up, because, like, I feel like I'm the same way, because people, like, that aren't songwriters, just they speak in, like, song lyrics all the time without even knowing it, or a friend might shoot you a text, like, and you're like, that's my hook right there,
Right. Well, always have that net out, man. Just always be looking. Like, you're writing, you're a songwriter 24/7. Is the truth of it. It really. And if you love it, that's fine. It's very fine.
Now, you've already spread a lot of good advice, but if you could give one, like, big piece of advice to aspiring musicians, songwriters out there, what would be that one piece of advice to them?
Man, I think, it was given to me when I was a young, I was aspiring to be a poet and write poetry and stuff. And it was just, it's like, a writer writes, period. End of sentence. A writer writes. Like, a writer doesn't do anything else that makes him a writer, and so get after it. It means write every day, write as much as you can. Don't adhere to any kind of, there's no dress code, and there's no background check, and there's no, like the only thing that qualifies you as a writer is writing. And, it's really that simple and that hard.
Awesome. Well, Jim, thank you again so much for coming on the show. I think that's some great
I'm
advice for our
flattered.
listeners.
Thanks for having me, Justin.
And everyone
Flattered
go
to be
check
here.
out Hot Truck Beer, one of his latest songs on the new Jake Owen record. Hey guys, thanks for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Make sure to subscribe and leave a comment, and check out my music on all streaming platforms at Justin McCormick. See you guys next time.